Hey all, just a quick video I want to record. We have our first meeting at the library for this summer tomorrow, and then another one Thursday, and then hopefully one or two a week until we have successfully gotten computers up and running. I want to recap what computers we have built over the years and the kits that we've settled on for this year. So back when we first built this first one, the summer of 2015, this is the computer I built, and several students built one just like it. This is the original CPUville kit, a Z80 processor, and if you're back from the 80s, that means something to you. I'll go in and talk about that a little bit. 2K of ROM, 2K of RAM, some built-in programs that do some stuff. As I just showed in the last video, the output bus is currently counting. So right now it's up to 128, 160 something. I don't know. You can convert that on your own time. And then over here is the addresses that are currently going back and forth, the data that's currently going back and forth, and processor register status for things like its interrupt, whether it's reading, whether it's writing, the clock speed. And the cool thing about this computer is that, well, many cool things about this little computer, is that you can buy, or you could buy, an expansion set that gave it new ROM and 64K of RAM, and you could use a compact flash card as virtual floppy drives, and you can get CP/M up and running on this, and then a serial port so you can talk to it via a terminal or a computer running terminal software and get this computer to do some pretty cool stuff. Unfortunately, this kit is no longer made. The guy who makes this, Don Stewart from CPUville.com, has a new kit. And that's this computer. Let me get this one up and running doing something cool, and then I'll give you a tour. Okay, this little computer is powered, up and running, and is talking to my desktop computer over this white serial line to a USB. So I'm going to come over here to my serial program, and I'm going to open a port to my serial controller, and then I hit return. And the computer comes back and says, commands implemented. Dump, load, jump, run, question, help, bload, bdump, disk read, and disk write. Well, let me explain what that's about first. So what we're looking at here is the display board for the computer. Much like this computer has a display board, this one shows me the address, the data, some status lines, some output ports, and we're about to do something with those. Inside here is somewhat the equivalent of the first computer that you saw there. I have a little disk drive emulation thing right here. It's actually a modern component, well, somewhat modern. It's probably still 20 years old, but it's acting like a disk drive. But there's no real operating system on this yet. I can, again, get this up and running with CP/M, but we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to read a program that I've written directly from a sector on that disk and then get that program to run. And let me show you that. I'm going to do that with disk RD, and it says, well, where do you want to load this into memory? And I know when I wrote this program, I wrote it into 0800, and it is currently at the logical block address, that's LBA. I think it's at 0. I might have put it at 1, but we'll see. So it has loaded one page of memory off of that disk. If I ask it to, is it dump? Display a block of memory. I'm going to load it at 0800. And believe it or not, that is a computer program. And part of the point of this whole exercise is that students will learn how that is a program that does something on the computer. Let me see what my commands are again. I'm going to run the program that is at 0800. Now, if you look at my screen, you see a bunch of what are called hexadecimal numbers flying by. We'll go into what hex is, but those are being displayed out here on these two output ports. So the address, data, and status lines are all blazing away at however many megahertz this thing runs. But look at this display. It's generating random numbers. Let me slow it down. I have it set so it is delayed by whatever value is on those switches. So now you see it number, 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 and it's generating pseudo-random numbers. And so when we start talking about how to write programs for this thing, we'll learn how computers generate random numbers. And the delay is read off of these ports. So if I start flipping switches, it starts flipping random numbers faster and faster. And I don't know about you, but if you're a child of the late 60s, early 70s like me, if you're a member of Gen X and watch the $6 Million Man, the Bionic Woman, blinking lights like that always look like a computer in the background doing something incredibly important. I love that. Now it's thinking really hard. It's doing something really important because it's blinking really fast. So awesome little kit here. It's got a few drawbacks compared to the first model for educational purposes. It's more expensive. There's a race to get CP/M running on it instead of being an optional kit. It's not as obvious on the slow clock and some things you can do with that. It's also got some more modern components on here, so it's a little... some of the stuff that I want to teach is a little hidden behind some of the modern components. So awesome kit. I highly recommend it. I'll put links in the description, but I want to go over a few more kits that we're trying out for educational purposes as well. A survey of computers from this era would not be complete without mentioning the 6502 processor. The other computers we're looking at today are all Z80 family members. That's like the Osborne, the TRS-80 Model 1, Model 3, most computers from the 70s, anything that ran CP/M. Very important class of machines from that era. On the other side is the 6502 microprocessor. This was the Apple II series, the Commodore 64, the Atari 800, even the Atari 2600 game console all used the 6502. And there's a reason why these two different architectures exist. That's a longer story, and maybe someday there will be some kind of comparative architecture study class that we can talk about. But this is kind of the Mac versus PC argument from its day. And the reason why this is not as great an educational platform is that there's no standard operating system for the 6502. The Z80, back in the day, it was very easy to get it up and running with CP/M. And if you can get it up and running with CP/M, there are classic games you can play. Zork, Wumpus, Sargon Chess, even popular business software like WordStar word processing, the first spreadsheet like Lotus 123, all that stuff is available to download and get running on a computer you built yourself. On the 6502 platforms, everything on those machines was not interoperationable between the different computers. The Atari software didn't work on the Apple, didn't work on the Commodore, and that's for a very typical hardware reason that is beyond the scope of this video today. So for an educational platform, the 6502s can be neat, but as a complete course in and of itself, it's not quite as good as far as I'm concerned for a retro computing platform. So it's out for at least intro courses. The next, I guess I should call it an entire class of computers that I want to talk about for purposes for our retro computing class, is another Z80 computer line called the RC2014. I have a few different variants here. This is the RC2014 Mini. It's kind of like our first computer in that the RAM, ROM, CPU, clock, and everything are all on one board. This thing is meant to talk, or to be a one-board computer. It talks over a serial port, but a more modern version of a serial port to USB. But it has this little bus here, all these ports, where the other computer used this really hard-to-navigate little pin connection thing. This has this bus called RC2014 that the guy who developed this kit standardized and has developed a whole community around. Let me show you what I mean. This is another computer in that family, and what we have here is, again, the entire computer on one board. Let me pop it out and show you. So that's the RAM, ROM, CPU, clock, support circuit, all on one board. And then these pins that plug into this backplane. And the neat thing about this is that you can get backplanes of different sizes. I have one here I'm going to assemble that holds 5 different cards. Another one here that I've partially assembled that holds 8 cards. So you can get more and more cards to build bigger and better computers that do stuff. And there are all kinds of different cards you can get for this ecosystem. Like I mentioned, this is an entire single board computer, kind of the same thing as this one. This is just the Z80 processor, not even the clock, just the processor on a card with just enough support circuitry to make it useful. Well, we can plug this into a breadboard and prototype how this thing works. And then this is just the RAM and the ROM on a card with a little support circuitry. Again, we can plug that in, and now we can watch how the CPU talks to the RAM and ROM in a way that we can't on other computers. It's just really useful to have these independent boards. This one is even way outside spec for the era. 512K ROM, 512K RAM. Small by today's comparisons, but huge for the 1980s era. Here's another one that is not a Z80, but a Z180, which is kind of, again, advancing another 5-6 years in spec. A lot more capable. It has SPI and I2C buses. It can talk to little SD cards. Another one that talks to compact flash. So there's a lot of variance in this platform, a lot of cool things you can do. Here is a little I/O card, 8 buttons and 8 lights. And then third parties build all kinds of cool stuff. This is a little interface to a graphic OLED screen, organic LED, and you can get this to display things. And then possibly one of the coolest retro stick in a blender and mix it up is this guy, which takes the sound interface device out of a Commodore 64, which were legendary back in the day for their chiptunes, their 8-bit music, and attaches it to this ecosystem so you can play chiptunes with these computers. It's pretty cool to build a computer from scratch and have it playing some era music. If I can find something, I'll close out the video with this. And then finally, I'm going to show out of this ecosystem the 3 possible kits that my students are choosing this year. The RC 2014 Mini, the Classic 2, or the Pro. Each one of those possibilities is kind of a sweet spot between price, amount of time soldering, and capability. And I actually have the package from my order, and we'll do an opening right here. Okay, here's my kit. I'm not going to be able to do another take with this one. I'm going to open this box for the first time. This arrived a few days ago from England. The guy that makes this stuff is all in the UK. And I'm going to open this one up. This contains one of each of the 3 kits that I just mentioned. And I'm going to start building one of these tomorrow at the library. My son is going to start building one of these. And the other one will be built at some future point for posterity. I have students that are getting their own kits and bringing them tomorrow. Well, let's take a look at what we're going to see. Okay, so I got 2 boxes, the Pro, the Classic 2, and the Mini. So here's the difference. I'll have links to this in the description below. The Mini is, well, I just had one here. Where'd it go? Is this. And this is actually something special to me. This is the Mini Limited Edition, number 18 of 25. That was a short order that he had that was a limited edition based on the color and some other things. But now I just have the normal Mini over here, the kit for the Classic 2, and the kit for the Pro. The Mini is the cheapest and probably the quickest to get up and running soldering. The Classic 2 is a little bit more expensive, maybe slightly better from an educational perspective because each part of the computer is on its own card, and that'll give us more of an ability to look in and poke it with a stick to understand what's going on. Now, both of these you can get CPM up and running on with another purchase of another kit that adds on to this. The Pro is kind of like the Classic 2 on steroids with that other kit and everything all baked in. So let's open these up and take a look at what we get. It's all nicely packed. Here's the Mini. And as you can see, the board that you saw on the first one, the chips on this protective foam, all the other little components, resistors, capacitors, LEDs. We'll talk about that stuff in a future video. The serial port, or the serial cable to let it talk to a computer. Over here is the Classic 2 with a bunch of little sockets for the chips to plug into. You'll see what those are in a future video. All the little pins for the cards that plug into the bus. Some other little resistors and capacitors. The backplane 8 for 8 slots for the backplane. The board, all the little boards for each computer part. All the other components, and all the other chips, and then a little sheet of instructions. Now this is one place where, as an educational kit, this is a little lacking. The kits are not really designed as well as the CPUville kits were for having a student sit down who's learning to solder for the first time. Now, having a teacher to help guide them with that reduces that problem. I'm hoping to build out some curriculum to use for this computer set to be able to help solve that problem with this ecosystem. Just have that kind of, this is kind of designed for the old graybeards that want to relive some of their youth. And I think it would be better suited if we had some material for all the Gen Z and millennials that are fascinated with retro computing these days, thanks to Ready Player One. So let's take a look at the Pro. We see a lot more to this kit. Again, a cable for power, let's connect it to your computer. All the components. These are all the little bypass capacitors or decoupling capacitors and the little sockets. You'll learn what decoupling capacitors are all about. Resistors, LEDs, little feet. A bunch of chips, all the computers that make a computer compute. And then all the boards that we spend time soldering into. You know, I should make a kit about, or a video about the kit that we use to solder. So each board is here, and then the backplane, and then all the backplane parts, and the compact flash pre-baked with CPM on it. This is probably the one I'm going to build. Yeah, I'm going to build that one. So there you have it, a survey of all the different kits that I built with students over the years, and a little bit of information on what each one of them is good for. The one that holds a special place in my heart, this original kit, which I think was probably the best educational breed of the bunch, no longer made. Every other kit has something going for it, something not quite going for it in that ecosystem. So the perfect kit doesn't exist. It really depends on what you want to learn, how much soldering you want to do, and what you want to use it for after you've built it and learned from it. Is it going to be something pretty that sits on your shelf, or is it going to be something that you want to learn more about electronics from? So there's no one perfect kit. I hope you've seen something here that interests you. I will have links to everything in the show notes. Thank you very much.